Let's move on. We'll add an adjustment layer to change some colors. I want that to go right on top of the Flower 2 layer, so I'll come to my Layers panel, select the Flower 2 layer, come up to my adjustments, and come and choose a Hue Saturation Adjustment. Set our settings. We'll set our hue to 43, saturation to 19, lightness we'll leave at 0. 43, tab, 19, tab, and 0. Note that this adjustment affects all the layers below. So this is affecting the Flower 2, the pineapple copy, clouds, and the background layer, all affected by that one hue saturation layer. So we want to limit that adjustment to be just the layer immediately below the adjustment layer. So we'll right-click on the layer name, right-click here on the layer name, and come down and choose Create Clipping Mask. And that clipping mask gives us a little arrow here and shows that the adjustment is attached only to the Flower 2 layer. Let's save. Let's tackle the extra credit on page 99. What we'll do is we'll add a second drop shadow to the Hawaii layer. Let's come on up and find the Hawaii layer. Double click on the drop shadow effect, open up those effects. We'll hit the plus sign right here next to drop shadow to add a second drop shadow. So we'll go to that second drop shadow and make some changes. We'll match the settings set on page 99. So we've got opacity set to 100, angle is 102, distance 20px, spread 27%, size 45px. We'll come here and we'll choose a color rather than black. We'll come down and we'll pick a color from this fuchsia flower, something like that. Hit OK, and OK again. Now we've got 2 drop shadows behind the Hawaii layer. And for your version of the extra credit, you don't have to match exactly the settings, but do go and get a second drop shadow on that Hawaii layer. Next, let's go see what happens when we change text, how the layer effects affect the new text. Come down and select the Island Paradise layer. Let's go and get the horizontal type tool. In the options bar, we'll set our font size to 32 point. When I hit tab, you'll see that that font changes. That's something to be careful of. If you have a layer selected and you go and change the settings of the tool, it will go ahead and modify that layer. Let's go and click right between Island and Paradise, and we'll add in the word of. Maybe space before the O and of. And notice that layer effect is applied to those new characters. We don't really need that, so we're going to go ahead and delete that. Now let's select the Move tool and recenter this text. Let's finish up our work on this image by moving the postage and drawing a border around the whole image on a separate layer. I'll go ahead and select the postage layer. Let me point out that if you have auto select checked in your Move tool, you'll want to uncheck that, because if you go and click and try to select the postage, you might miss and then select a different layer. I uncheck my auto select. Now when I click and drag here with the postage layer, it's going to move the postage. I'll move it down here and over to the right. Now let's make a new layer that sits on top of all the other layers. I'll click on the Island Paradise layer, which is the top layer, and I'll come down and click on New Layer to make a brand new layer. It's called Layer 1. I'll do Select All. Control A would work for that. And I'll do Select, Modify, and Border. And that will let me choose the width of the border. I'm going to make a 10 pixel border. And hit Enter or OK. So just to be clear, I have not actually created a border. I've just selected a border area around my image, 10 pixels wide. Now I'm going to go and fill that selection with white. What I'll do is I'll get white as my foreground color. One simple way to do that is to go back to the default foreground colors. Hit D on your keyboard will give you the default foreground and background colors. And I'll hit X to exchange. Now that I've got white in the foreground, I can come up to Edit and Fill. And I'll choose Contents foreground color. Note, by the way, that I could have simply chosen white right here. Hit OK, and now you've got a white border all around. I'll Control D to deselect, and I'll double click on that layer name. It's called layer 1. I'm going to double click it and call it instead border. Finally, let's talk about flattening. The book talks about flattening. We've got a lot of layers here. I'll scroll down and let you see my full layer panel. A ton of layers here. That makes for a larger file size. The problem with flattening, of course, is that you lose the ability to change anything within these layers. So if you're going to flatten, you should do what we're going to do right now, which is to save an unflattened version. Just to be sure, I'll do a file save one more time, Control S. Now I'll choose image and duplicate. And I'll call this 04 flat.psd. Notice I have two images open now, the working, which is my unflattened version, and flat, which will soon be my flattened version. I'm going to go ahead and close working, stay on flat, and then let's go flatten it. We will flatten it by clicking layer, coming down to the next to last one and choose flatten image. All those layers gone, all that's left is background. Let's do a file save one more time. And it gives us save as flat.psd. Click save. Note that when you submit the work for this lesson, be sure to submit both the flattened and unflattened versions.